Welcome to Porch Play Chat, sponsored by the American Association for the Child's Right to Play, or more affectionately called IPA USA. IPA USA is the USA affiliate of the International Play Association. As part of our efforts to promote play, we've introduced Porch Play Chats, and these are conversations with people who are just as passionate about play as we are. I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm the president of IPA USA. And with me on the porch is Ross Thompson. Hi, Ross.
Hello, Deb. How are you?
I'm great. It's great to see you. Ross is a longtime advocate for play and an avid Dungeons and Dragons player. He's the co-host of the podcast Teaching with the Body and Mind, and the program and educational director to help children create play-based and nature-based early learning centers in the South Metro area of Minnesota. So if Ross can do it in Minnesota, anybody can do it. So Ross, today we're going to talk about the art of storytelling and the role in supporting a play-based environment. And I can't wait for this topic. It sounds so great.
Well, I'm excited too. And I think it's, I was thinking, well, how could we jump into the topic? And I was going to ask you, without kind of putting you too much on the spot, but can you remember some of your favorite stories? I mean, it could be from adulthood, but as from childhood, like stories you love to hear, whether it was books or told by someone. Are there any that jump out to you? And maybe without having to recap the whole story, like what was it about the story that was so captivating?
Okay, so I had a very interesting childhood, fabulous parents, wonderful, nurturing, loving parents who never read anything other than the obituaries at breakfast table.
I think you and I are very similar to that.
So, and then I had a childhood injury when I was 5 and it was bad. So I never was read a book at home. I never had books. I didn't go to kindergarten because of my childhood injury. And so my first experience of school was in first grade. I didn't know what a letter was. I didn't know how to write my name. I never had a book read to me. My parents talked to me all the time, so I had great vocabulary. And I was reading at a first grade level in 3 months because I was ready, right? Developmentally ready. Doesn't mean I was a child prodigy, because I certainly was not. But when my teacher would read stories, she read fairy tales. And I got lost in the fairy tales and loved them, and still to this day love them.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of, teachers would tell stories about their adventures. And I love those. Anytime they talked and were able to describe something from their own experience, I really enjoyed it.
It's almost as if you're looking kind of like right at my outline of the things I was going to talk about today, because this is exactly it. What a great segue.
Yeah.
Without going on a anthropological kind of 8-hour lecture on why storytelling has been so significant, I think, we can look back that this was our means of communication. This is our means of, before books were made, before, maybe even before, arguably before songs, or right as songs were being told, storytelling was our means of sharing knowledge, sharing information, sharing history. So we know we have a deep, deep root to stories. And I think if we ask anybody to go, tell us your favorite story as a kid, there'll be something that will come up. Even if, like you openly said, like, I didn't get a lot of books read to me early on, and I didn't either, that I remember. And there's still stories that I remember from those times, whether it's being told by a family member or, by, remembering going to the community library where they had book readings going on. So I think to me, storytelling is not just something to schedule in your day. Have your 10 minutes to read your book and then do your next thing. Oh, but it's related to our topic. That can be a bonus, but seeing it as valuable as the way you'd support any of the other content areas, I think is something to keep in mind. And I think to me, it feels like it's a great tool to have in your pocket all the time, because, we're on a field trip and we were supposed to take the bus and there it goes. We got to wait another 10 minutes. How do we eat? How do we fill this time without trying to say, don't stop touching that. Don't do that. Don't move, or we were going to go, what happens a lot at our school, we have one kind of shared bathroom between 3 classrooms that, if we're all going to snack at the same time, we can all wait in the hallway and then get kind of rowdy and, people are trying to run down, or I can tell a story. And like you said, I find it really captivating when I tell a story from my childhood and the children are like, but was it real? Was it, this? And so there's a lot of threads here I'm trying to put together into this nice sweater. So let's see if I can come back and do it. But that if you see it as a means of gathering, as a means of sharing community, as a means of telling more about yourself and kind of letting the children in to get to know you and build that connection and that relationship. I mean, from that alone, it's an extremely valuable thing I think to practice.
And I think the one thing, like I tell stories of experiences with children in classrooms or stories of families, right, in my college courses, it also gives them insight into who you are, right? It forms that connection. It also has so much cultural history. I mean, traditions, values, beliefs are shared during stories.
Right.
From grandparents to parents to children. And so it is such a rich and appropriate way to engage children. And they'll have their own stories. And those are my favorite when they start telling their own stories. Those are, but they have that experience of us telling stories. Right. To help them sort of understand what it looks like. There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. And it could be, a minute and a half and you've got a story. Yeah.
Well, and exactly that. Like, it also gives us a window into what their lives are like, what their experiences are, because sometimes it gives us the picture of like, oh, it does seem like it's maybe why you come to school upset or why you feel the way you do, because maybe it seems like the way the stories you tell at home sound like it's not maybe as settled of an environment as one would hope. And so it can give us that window into who the children are. It also just, if we want to, again, because we need to connect it to a standard, we need to connect it to a thing. Well, here we go. Like you said, they'll tell stories where my dog's nose is wet. And then I went over and I had a cupcake, and then I went but then my brother took my toy, and they're going around and around. Oh, but now they're saying once upon a time, or not even using but here's the beginning of the story. Here's the problem in the story, the resolution, and now the end. Well, now we have sequencing. Now we know that they're putting pieces together in a row, so you can check that box without having to sit down and try to do it. It can happen right at the snack table. So, there's that piece of, we can tie it to things. However, as you said just a moment ago, it lets them have a picture into who you are, and it gives us a picture into who they are. Now our relationship has a connection because we get to know each other at more of a real level. So if that doesn't sell on, storytelling, I don't know what will. But, and what I'm hoping to talk about today is like the idea of oral storytelling and how that goes. I've got a stack of books here next to me that are some of my favorite stories to read. And some of as we were talking off air, what books are really kind of coming out that have substance, that have something to say, and not just the token kind of characters or just this kind of fluff that got put through the production because it's going to make money or whatever. So,
good books are so hard to find, as we talked about. And so finding a book that is meaningful to children's experiences, right? And they can easily relate to, and they can deepen their understanding of something, like how people are feeling. Did you ever feel that way? Oh, so you can really make those connections. So good books. Everyone needs to be extremely critical viewers before you buy that book, because there's some awful things out there.
Well, and also that and to go through every page, the quick anecdote before I share probably my favorite book to have, and that it just for me as a person, but also to have in the classroom. It's one of my favorites. But a quick side note, to look through your books, because at a summer camp years ago, we had books in our box that were just donated, and we're a bunch of college students who are using this summer job to work with kids, and the box of books are now over there. You can just read them if you need to have some quiet time or whatever. And somebody got a book, and there was this book, and I don't remember the title, I don't remember the author, but it's the premise is the little boy who cried wolf. So, but this one is the little girl who called fire. And it's this and again, it's child illustrations, but it's, kind of Victorian times. And she would yell fire because then the fire brigade would have to get the wagon and they would run down the street and there would be this big hoopla. And she thought it was so funny. Well, we know how this story is going to end. However, rather than being saved in time, to maybe make it more child friendly, the last page was this charred hand sticking out of the rubble. And I watched this, young college student get to the page and go, oh, well, I guess we'll be done now. And it was too right. That wasn't appropriate for this group of, I think, first and second graders. So scan your books. There's a message there. But speaking of books, you can't see this one because the book jacket's going through, but the rips through here. This book,
yeah, you can see it's a loved book.
It is. This is my favorite book from Aaron Becker. Aaron Becker is a 3-part series. He's got many other books, but this Journey, Quest, and Return are the 3 books. And this is a wordless book.
Oh, love
that starts with these really beautiful illustrations,
images,
these deep and kind of rich watercolors, but it very clearly can kind of tell this story of a child who feels disconnected and then comes upon this magic crayon, and all of a sudden this world transforms into
beautiful colors. Oh, so pretty.
So just even in the quick scan, if people pause it and kind of look, the story tells itself. But what I love about this kind of book and these wordless books is that I can tell the story however I'd like. And I think the value of this kind of style, and one, to preface that something that I'm very comfortable with, and Deb, I'd imagine too, you could take a book like this and probably create the story after a quick look through and have some rich detail. But I can add words like, feeling alone, but also just disconnected, or that, she's trying to reach out to find people and having different variations based on what's happening in our class. Maybe someone new comes into our classroom. Maybe this is how they could be feeling. And I don't need to say, and sometimes this child has a name in the story. Sometimes they don't. Yeah. And my favorite name for her is Journey. One of the kids said, I think that's her name. This is her story. And I said, well, this is now going to be something I carry with me all the time.
Absolutely.
And so if you're not a very comfortable storyteller, it can be a pretty simple version of the story and still be very compelling and engaging. But the more you tell it, the more you might start sneaking in more of those descriptors about, the smell of that magical land or the magical forest, or how dim and how the fireflies are just popping little lights all around. You can start to paint the picture with your words, and they have the visuals right there. But like with this page, with her reaching out to tree, she's, was just on the stoop. She was feeling kind of by herself. Sometimes mom up here is annoyed. Sometimes dad is frustrated because she's bothering him while he's trying to finish a report. And sometimes sister is annoyed because, you're just the little sister. Sometimes mom's, I really wish I could go and play, but I'm on the phone with your aunt and I gotta finish dinner because we're gonna eat soon. And I go, and then I would love to go play, but I gotta finish this big report for a meeting I have tomorrow. And I would go play with you, but I gotta finish my report for tomorrow before I have to turn it in. And that we can vary what happens. And so it's
Story.
not always the same kind of neglected character, or that these people do really love you and that they can be. And that journey, I got to go reverse while I'm on the screen, this is another way to bring in topics such as gender, because, Journey has longish hair. Are they a boy? Are they a girl? Are they non-binary? They can be whoever we want them to be. And that's what I let the children, every time we kind of go through, to say, well, this is how we'll tell it this time. When you tell it, you get to pick. And same with the cat that's in her room. The cat's name changes every time.
And when that adds excitement to a story. And I remember when I taught, I'm old, so we didn't have the internet, we didn't have iPads, we didn't have iPhones. I think maybe I didn't even have a flip phone. We had the portable cordless phones from the house, right? And so I remember we would read stories, and the children really, really loved the story, and they wanted me to read the story 100 times a day, right? Read the story again. Of course, let's sit down, let's read the story. Read the story. Okay, sure, let's sit down. And I just like technology in any classroom before the 3rd grade. But one of the things we did have was a listening center. So there are some appropriate ones. And so I finally, and we had cassette tapes. I finally, read the story with the same inflections and the same fun, and put it in the listening center, and children would go there and they were memorizing the book. Right. And so when I read it, they would be saying the words as I was reading the story. It was beautiful. That's literacy, people. That's literacy. That's not, what's this letter? That's not, let's, figure out what an uppercase and a lowercase letter is. You don't need any of that. Right. Literacy is them seeing the words and understanding that print has meaning. That's literacy, people. So, there's so many things we can do with stories. Right. But I think we think, oh, we had circle time, we have to read 2 stories and everybody has to sit there. No, we had a pile of books. The children would say, I want you to read these books today. And it was a pile of books that they would bring and sit by where we did circle. And I would read 1 or 2, but the rest of them went over the book area, and anybody could go over and read a book to a child. Right. And so we got through all those books every day. And they didn't have to have the whole group. Right. It could be, you sit in the book area, you open a book, you start reading, and joy comes. Right. Well, and what I like these Aaron Becker books, like they stay on the bookshelf all year, because what's great, and I've seen happen almost every year since I've gotten these books and used them and told the stories, is that they'll sit together and then they'll tell the story to each other. Yes. And to listen to the ways that sometimes they try to say it exactly the same, but as their fluency with storytelling grows, just like it does when you're an infant trying to learn to walk, or you're learning to write your name and you got really wobbly letters, to where you finally start to get them kind of in order, and then all of a sudden you get them all together. Once they understand how to do that, now their versions really start to come out. And again, how invaluable is that for what's going to be waiting for them down the road? Exactly. It is the purest, most beautiful way of engaging children in stories, versus everybody has to sit in circle. You have to be crisscross applesauce. Everybody has to listen to the story. Don't ask any questions. It's like, no, what are you doing? They need to be able to ask questions. They need to be engaged. It shouldn't be drudgery to sit and listen to a story. Right. Well, and I think there's ways you got to find how it works as well, so it's not constant disruption. So you're always off, you can't get through the book, but this also, I hope you don't read one book and that's it. I hope you go back and read it 3, 4, 5 times throughout maybe the day or that week or whenever. So that way they can start to ask the questions that are going to become deeper or more relevant, or why did that happen? But I was thinking of, if we think about storytelling and story acting, there's the work of Vivian Gus and Paley, who is, is so invaluable for that story acting, which,
You tell me the story. Now we all have to act it out. For those that want to participate, for those that, so again, it's taking it from the abstract and using their bodies as these thinking tools to then retell the story. So again, we're bringing that knowledge to a physical level where now it can start to really register. And then we go back to get into the abstract lines and shapes that, those are letters, and getting into those pieces. So
but they have to value books instead of, books should be pleasurable. I can't go to sleep at night without reading.
Right.
If I need to relax, I read. And remember, I didn't have anybody read to me.
Right.
So our goal, I think, is to make books so engaging and so fun that children are eager to learn to read them. Right. And to look through them.
Yeah.
So I know you had some things you're going to put up on the virtual background about how you start stories or ideas for creating your own story in the classroom.
Because that was, I was like, how much time can we spend on each of these topics? Because books are so great. And, that's a great thing to bring in. However, you can get stuck. By Oliver Jeffers. There's a quick plug. This is a great book that's hilarious about a child whose kite gets stuck. And I won't ruin the detail or the ending,
That's
but
a great book.
One thing after another keeps going into the tree as he tries to get his kite out. And then, of course, children think it's hilarious because, the silliness of it. But the point of that is you might not have the exact book that you're trying to bring in to tell the story, to capture the ideas or the questions that are coming up in your class. Or, you have books about building community in the start of school, but it's all predetermined of who is in the class. What do they look like? Well, if I'm really wanting to start the beginning of the year, I try to tell stories that include the children themselves. And it can be on the whiteboard that we have, the little easel whiteboard. And unfortunately, I couldn't find the picture, but I can give a quick example that, if I can't draw it online, but I'll draw it right here real quick as we're going. So one summer day, Ross was out for a bike ride, and riding through the neighborhood, he found his friend Deb, and she was there. And he rode up and said, "Hi, Deb, nice to see you."
Making a new friend.
Yep. And Deb says, "Boy, that sure looks like a fun bike. I wish I could go bike riding." And Ross said, "Well, sure you can. Hop on." Deb says, "Oh, there's only one seat." And Ross says, "Oh yeah, watch this." And all of a sudden, his bike got bigger. And then Deb joined him on the bike.
And I think the beauty is that, and then they go find another friend, right?
And so we go through the whole class and everybody gets a seat on the bike.
Oh my God.
So
whose name do they, if children, I always go back to Bev Bosworth, how does your story start, right?
Yep.
And who listens to that story? The child who wrote it, right, is what Bev tells us. And then if I'm doing anything in the classroom with children, they want to hear their names. So, the Willoughby Wallaby song where you can do funny things with their names and rhymes. And that they get so much pleasure. So if you use their names to tell the story, and as they get more used to how a story goes, when I was a teacher, and again, chart paper and markers, I would say, who wants to start the story? Someone would start the story, and word for word, who cared about grammar, and who wants to add to the story. And we would make 2 or 3 chart pages worth of stories by the time they were 4.
Right.
Because we've been doing it since they were in the toddler room, talking about telling stories. it builds on itself. It gets richer. It's built off their prior knowledge of what a story is, and they add to it. So please, let's think about what we can do.
Well, and we know the value of social stories.
Yes.
Specifically like and this being one of them, but on the never ending bike, I don't let them know that, okay, you're going to be in the story. I just start it. And then all of a sudden, because, hey, wait, is that you? Are you riding the bike? And I said, well, let's find out. And then I go to the first person who's maybe sitting in the group, and I might work left to right so I don't forget, like, to make sure everybody's
who they are and where they are. Yeah.
But like, oh, wait. And then the bike gets bigger. And then I go to the next person, and you can already feel the anticipation because the children are like, I see what's happening here.
And I know that my name's going to come soon.
Yep. But
and
also
be a new friend.
And the metaphor that, well, we're all together on this bike, just like we're all together in this classroom. So that kind of social storying to lay those early experiences out to then, now maybe I'm feeling more connected, and I'll reach out to the new person that I haven't met yet, but I'll ask if they want to play, or I'll ask if they want to maybe draw the pictures again with me on the whiteboard. But also when problems come up, that we can use it to solve conflict. And in that's where I'll have probably different characters. We have also a few different stuffed animals that are very beloved in our classroom, who maybe they have the problem of being, struggling with taking turns, or not, not responding when someone's trying to get your attention, or pushing when you're feeling frustrated, whatever it is. But now the stuffed animals will be the drawings on the board, or the puppets themselves will act it out.
Yes.
And again, we know that value of being able to solve the conflict when I'm not involved, when I'm able to step back and I can say, well, they should probably do this. And again, we know the research, the number of child psychologists who use that very method to kind of get the pictures of what's going on in these children's lives. Well, now I can see, how would you solve this problem when it's not you and you're not flooded with emotion? Oh, this will be a great thing to kind of come back to and have that conversation later. Again, not when you're upset, but hey, I remember during the story, you helped our friend Long-Legged Larry, who's a frog, you'll see a picture of him later, and Raven, who's a raven, you helped them solve that problem. Oh, you know what? I remember that happened with you the other day. Man, I wonder if we can do that again next time. And I'll try to help you remember. But having them trust that, oh, wait, I do know this. I can solve these problems. And again, it's not going to happen the first time. It may not happen the 12th time, but we're planting that seed through the storytelling, through the means of being able to now create our own story, because we can't find that book that's just what we need. I need a little bit more
right there when you need it.
Yeah,
I used puppets, and in my college classroom I have a dragon puppet because I love dragons, and I have a little frog puppet. And so they reenact a child. Someone will say, what do you do when a child bites? And so I'll go get the two puppets. Or what do you do when someone hits somebody over the head and they're hurt? So I go get the puppets. And the puppets then take over in the college classroom. The puppets take over the scenario. And I say, what should we do? And everybody then starts responding. And I said, that's what children will do, right?
Yeah.
That's what kids will do, because it helps them say, oh, there are other things to do other than hit people.
Right.
Oh, there are other things to do instead of saying a mean word. And so when I was a teacher in a classroom with 3 and 4 year olds, and something happened, which it happened frequently, I would say, circle up. And they all knew that we had to come to the circle, and I got the puppets. Something just happened. And then the puppets reenacted the story. What should we have done instead? And oh my goodness, social skills, emotional regulation. It was amazing.
Yeah.
When you're not just talking to Johnny, you can't hit Susie because, that made her cry. There are logical consequences that have to take place, but it really gives them tools when we retell the story about a scenario that happened.
And if we want to, again, I always kind of tie this back to like for kindergarten readiness, what's going to be more valuable? What is your kindergarten and even early elementary teachers going to say? I want them to have that emotional regulation, that means of, being able to adapt to certain social situations or realize there's another option when I'm frustrated, or I can at least write all upper and lower case letters.
Yeah. Which one would you prefer?
But I'm a nightmare when I feel frustrated because I don't know how to regulate these feelings, right? So we're giving them that thing. And also that subtlety of, hey, Dragon has that same problem that I have sometimes. I'm not alone. I'm not a bad kid. I'm not going to be always the villain here. And I try to make sure that the characters change.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The
Who's being
dragon's
frustrated.
always sometimes the victim.
Exactly.
And it's a frog who did it.
Right. And so, but that the children have that. And also that what's I love about this age is that even at 4, because right now I've been working with 4 or 5s the last few years rather than 3, 4, and 5s, because 3s are just, it's, they love it. But the 4 and 5s, they know that they're puppets, but they'll still talk to them as people in the classroom. And they'll also be like, I don't think you're real. Are you real? And they're like, well, yeah, of course I'm real. I'm right here. I'm talking to you. And they're like, oh, okay, I was just checking. Like, like they're on that cusp of
Piaget.
But it's that magic, right? There's still that piece of that storytelling that feels the fantasy is right around. Like I'm starting to know, because that's where we get into also fiction, nonfiction.
Yes.
And make believe or real life. And I'll ask, do you want a fiction or a nonfiction story? Do you want something that was really that happened or that was from my imagination? And sometimes I ask them, I say, I'm going to tell this story. You tell me what you think. Right? Because again, just that wonderful dance that we can do with imagination, but that they get to create the stories in their minds. And one more point.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ross. Think of the critical thinking that you're fostering when they're trying to figure out, is this real or pretend, as they're listening to the story. And so you've asked them a question, you tell the story, and now they're trying to figure out the answer. It's just, it's so rich in concepts that you don't forget those standards. You've just covered like 25 of them.
Right.
In one, 15-minute story, right? I could go through the standards and say, yep. And wouldn't parents be impressed with that? If you could just say, here's how what we're doing aligns with these standards if you have to, or we have to justify. I don't think we should have to. It's just good practice.
And then the conversations that they have between themselves, because that's what also I love is they'll start to go, well, but it can't be real because this is happening. And then are unicorns actually real or are they not? Well, and again, it's not about getting the right answer necessarily. It's that critical thinking that I can step back and say, well, you four discuss this. What do you think?
What do you think happens?
And, getting them ready for their early debate teams or things like that. But
exactly.
The other point I was going to add is that also with the social storytelling is that I've over the years have gotten really cognizant of who the characters are and who's represented to make sure that there are not just people that look like me or people that look like us in the classroom. Because I've in the community I live in, the schools that I've taught at have been a pretty homogeneous group for the most part, with not 100%, of course, but it's not a representation of our greater Twin City area. And so making sure that we're having conversations that involve different parts of our population, different ability levels, different family structures, different races of people, because and not that it's the focal point of the story, it's just their characters in the story.
Yes. And you need to see them and visualize them. And they shouldn't always be, people of color shouldn't always be in a service industry. They need to be doctors and lawyers and teachers. It's, and so our book, so I think we're like, we've talked a long time, Ross. So 3 minutes to close up, but I do want to say this, I think what we have to figure out is how do we help children see themselves in stories?
Mm-hmm.
How do we help them see themselves in the future, even though they have no idea what tomorrow is?
Right.
How do we give them images that are non-stereotypical,
Right.
not images that are not just the token person of color in a book,
Mm-hmm.
that, there's 7 white children and 1 child of color.
Right. Right.
So really, and then you have to really be thoughtful about what is the role that each person plays
Yeah.
in the story, because those things that we talk to them about, this is why you really have to look at your books. The things that we talk about, those images that they see is what is really what they believe, right? Because they're in that pre-operational thing of Piaget. So we have to be really careful.
Yeah. Well, and as I've done my own kind of dive into the anti-bias kind of curriculums that we're teaching with, that we do have conversations that involve injustice or that involve privilege and that involve these, and not in very huge ways where we're bringing in topics that are beyond the scope of what our preschoolers can handle, but having conversations that do address that, because we want, as we would with when children feel like it's not fair that they always get to play with the blocks and I don't. Well, it's also, here's where also other parts of our the daily life for many people doesn't feel fair, and it hasn't been fair for a long time. So including those conversations, and this is probably where it starts to get scary to start telling those stories for people, but to also, I feel like that's what we have to do, is to be able to work through the discomfort, but also to keep it an appropriate level of conversation so that the children can get it, that they can start to take that with them, because they'll start to stand up for each other and speak up for one another because they care about one another.
One of the books that I read yesterday to the preschoolers was Speak Up. It was a great book.
Yeah.
Speak up. And the words are like this big on the page. And as I was reading the book, I would say, and I'm going to point to these words, and this says speak up. And so when you see those words and I point to them, then you can say speak up. And it was really, really good about social justice and interaction, and very appropriate, with some really good vocabulary words that they were like, what does hue mean? I said, oh, let's talk about that. And so then we talked about what hue was. And I said, can you see the difference in the hues? And then they would say, I see the difference in the hues on that page. Show me the difference. So it was, I'm like, I've got to read to children more often.
Yeah.
It was so much fun.
So I think because we do have to wrap up, and we'll get to our pictures another time, but like for the how to start telling, I think that's the part for those to, how do you start telling your own stories? I think starting simple, starting short, and tell stories from your own childhood. And they don't have to be these big elaborate productions and things. It can be like, you remember or did I ever tell you about the time that my dog pulled me over? Oh, well, I was walking my dog and they saw a squirrel, and then they started to run, and I was only 6, and they pulled and I flew onto the ground. The end. Like
the end.
It doesn't have to be anything more than that. And I think building up that confidence to starting simple, starting small, but then you want to make an invented story, use something you already know. Tell a version of the Three Little Pigs, but this time, instead of building it out of the usual, they build it out of marshmallows,
pretzel
books,
sticks,
whatever.
Yeah.
But just to build your comfort, because the more you do it, the more you'll be able to see the ways you can start to change, you can start to improvise, you can start to include, and you can bring in those questions or those situations that are happening in the classroom or in your community. Oh, this is something that's just happened, pretty big, thing that's happening in the news. How do I bring it in so we can process it and talk about it together? And so I think to start storytelling, finding great books, and you can reach out to me and I can share a whole list of great things.
I was going to say, if you'll send me 3 or 4 with the author's names, I'll stick them in the YouTube show thing.
Perfect.
which would be, I think, really helpful to get people started on, okay, so I'm going to go to Barnes and Noble or to the library, and I'm going to look for a book that doesn't have any words. Well, you have to go further than that.
Right.
And the other thing I want everybody to hear is, if you think that getting through the book is the goal, that is always the goal. You go where the children lead you, right? And so the last thing I'll say is, gauge children's interest in your stories or the stories that they create versus the book that you're reading, and you'll see how powerful stories are. It's truly an amazing experience, and it's a wonderful opportunity for them to learn how to tell their own stories.
Yeah.
Okay, don't go anywhere. Let me close this out.
Mm-hmm.
To learn more about IPA USA, please visit our website at ipausa.org. Up in that top right-hand corner is the link to our Facebook page, so you can be a friend, our Instagram page that you can follow, our YouTube channel where you can subscribe. And if you do those things, then every Monday morning, magically, a new Porch Play Chat will appear in your feed. So until next time, keep on playing.
Thanks.